What we saw Jaden Daniels do last night, going to Detroit, knocking off the number one seed as a rookie. Detroit coming off a bye, had all the advantages. Only the second time we've seen a rookie quarterback do that. Has a bunch of football fans, including some of you, saying, see, that's why we need to just go get one of those guys. As if Jaden Daniels and guys like him grow on trees. But what if I told you there's something about Daniels and his experience, his profile, his resume that teams can focus on and target to try to find a college quarterback you can win with as a rookie, even if you had to, without even having to take him second overall or even in the top 5 or 10. I'll tell you what that factor, those qualities are, and which quarterback in this year's draft may exemplify those, and a guy that the Seahawks might be able to target themselves at some point in the draft. This is Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Be sure to head on over to BetUS, get in on all the latest money lines and prop bets. And if you sign up for a new account today, they'll give you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your second and third deposits if you use the promo code YouTube150. Welcome back to the show, everybody. How much fun was that, right? If you are joining me live here at 3:30 Pacific time on Sunday, then you watched the Eagles beat the Rams, knock them off. No more NFC West teams left in the playoffs. There will not be a Super Bowl champion in the Seahawks division this offseason anyway. In a driving snowstorm, the Rams gave it a shot. Eagles got a 2-score lead late. The Rams came back and almost pulled it off, drove down into the red zone at the end before the Eagles closed the door. So a lot of fun. Another weather game on tap in Buffalo here in just a couple of minutes. But as we turn our attention to the offseason for the Seahawks, there's a lot to talk about. And, of course, a lot of the focus is going to be on the quarterback position, right? Before we get to that, couple of updates, just to sort of set the stage for the next 24 to 48 hours as far as the offensive coordinator search goes, because I do think that could be resolved by Tuesday. With the Lions now out, eliminated last night by the Washington Commanders, Hank Fraley, who we know the Seahawks have interviewed virtually once, the offensive line coach of the Detroit Lions, and there were reports late in the week that they do wish to or intend to interview him again in person for a second interview. Well, now the floodgates are open and all the restrictions are kind of laid aside. And as early as tomorrow, the Seahawks could interview Fraley again in person. Now, will he take the interview? Does he want to? Now that the Lions are out, the head coaching market should speed up pretty quickly because we had all these teams with vacancies waiting on Aaron Glenn, on Ben Johnson. There was one report today that was kind of worded in sort of a sketchy way, but indicated that Johnson has decided he is going to take one of these jobs this year. He will not return to Detroit again as he did a year ago to try to, run it back. And that his decision may kind of affect some of these other ones as well. And some of the dominoes will start to fall now. Well, Fraley is one of those guys. He's so well respected. Frank Ragnow, the outstanding center for the Lions, quoted today while he's cleaning out his locker that he'll do anything he can to try to convince Fraley to stay. To which Seahawk fans on Twitter immediately replied, well, Frank, if you like him that much, why don't you come with him, right? But we don't know how all that's going to go. Fraley could turn down a second interview with the Seahawks because maybe he would prefer to go with Johnson, wherever he gets a head coaching job, to be his offensive coordinator in title, even though Johnson would certainly call the plays, at least for the first year. So we don't know how that's going to go. But the Seahawks can interview him as early as tomorrow. And so we should get some resolution. What we know so far, 5 reported candidates have been interviewed, including Thomas Brown, Byron Leftwich, Grant Udinski from the Minnesota Vikings, and Clint Kubiak. Udinski and Kubiak were here Friday, interviewed in person for the second time, both of them with the Seahawks. So we should get some resolution coming up here pretty quickly. Just some thoughts on that. Some things I've kicked around, talking to, other people that you see on the show here. A lot of conversation with Michael Thompson, a lot of conversation with Bryce Coots about possibilities, because some of these guys wouldn't seem like obvious candidates to call plays for the Seahawks. Leftwich being one of them. He's been out of the league for a couple of years, and Udinski because he's so young and has only held the title of assistant quarterback coach and special projects manager. Some of these guys might be in line to be in other roles. We saw the one report last week that Fraley had already begun reaching out to guys about possibly being his passing game coordinator. Maybe Leftwich is one of those. Maybe Udinski is. What do I think is going to happen? I'm intrigued by the Fraley idea, but I think at the end of the day, Kubiak has everything that Mike McDonald's looking for in how he runs an offense. He's had some opportunities to actually call plays in the pros. Hasn't been an overwhelming success, but I think his pedigree is such that if he was one of those guys that had never called plays and he was available this offseason, he'd be a hot candidate, because sometimes the allure of what might be is a little bit more interesting than maybe a guy that we can pick apart because we've seen some of the mistakes he's made. So that's where that stands. And that's all tied in to what the Seahawks are going to do next at the quarterback position, right? That OC may have a different idea or have his own ideas about the type of quarterback that would fit his system, how he feels about Geno Smith and whether he can make that work. Maybe even go as far down the road as, how do you feel about Sam Howell? Is he a guy you can win with? We saw the report last week that last year when Ben Johnson was going through the interview process with the Washington Commanders, that he actually wanted them to keep Howell and use the number 2 pick on something else. And that the other two teams that were attempting to acquire Howell last year when the Seahawks did were the Rams and Broncos. Sean Payton, Sean McVay. So maybe a new OC thinks you can win with him. Or a certain type of quarterback that might fit in with this class we're about to see in this draft. And what I'm going to do is use Brock Purdy as an example of how you can find guys to win with at other levels of the draft. Sometimes, not every year, sometimes, but I think this year and this draft class may have a couple of guys that fit the mold I'm going to describe for you, because there's one or two qualities or resume points that Brock Purdy possesses that I think teams are looking for now, maybe more than ever, because they're all asking themselves, how did we miss on this guy? How did we let this guy fall to the last pick in the draft? And I know there's a little bit of, Purdy's a polarizing prospect. Some think he's near the top of the list in the echelon of NFL quarterbacks. And some might feel like he's more quote unquote mid, or just a byproduct of his system and his play caller and everything else. But that kind of plays into my point. Because one thing we've been talking about for the last few weeks, and we'll continue to talk about this entire offseason, is how no matter whether or not the Seahawks decide to extend and stay with Geno Smith for a while or not, either way, they have to fix that offensive line, and they need to employ a play caller that has shown, or at least has a plan, and can get them to trust in that plan to protect that quarterback and provide an infrastructure so that he can succeed. And in that circumstance, you don't necessarily have to have a guy with elite traits, because that's the way quarterback scouting's always been done. It's always been the prototype. And it used to be much different than it is now. It used to be 6'4", 6'5", big, tall, can stand in the pocket, strong-armed, can fire rockets all over the field, and beat teams with his arm. If you had a little bit of mobility, that was just kind of a bonus. But even if you did, 20 years ago, teams didn't really know what to do with that or how to use that to their advantage. Well, that type of quarterback's kind of becoming a dinosaur, right? And there's a couple of different qualities that teams are looking for now. And one in particular, as it relates to Brock Purdy. Get into that in just a second. First of all, I just want to remind you, hit that thumbs up button to like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell button for notification of future episodes. And all the ways you can support the channel are listed down below in the description. Also, tonight, if you're watching this live at 6 o'clock Pacific time, over on the other YouTube channel, The Pick Is In, you can find that at The Pick Is In Pod. Bryce Coots of the Hawk Zone Rundown and myself have launched a new channel, started it last week, where we're going to take a look at the draft as it relates to the entire league. It will not be Seahawks specific. Last week we did a full NFL first round mock draft. Tonight we're going to dive deeper into this quarterback class and get Bryce and some of his scouting reports from the film he's watched on these quarterbacks. And if you're not familiar with his work, haven't seen him on the show or his own show, Bryce is a quarterback coach, owns a quarterback academy, and is an offensive coordinator. So I can't wait to get his thoughts on this class. So if you want to go deeper into this, join us for that. All right, so what are those qualities? One is you got to be able to move around a little bit. I think we just saw that. Mobility is so important now. I think any guy that comes out of college now, even if you're just a surgical passer downfield at the college level, if you're 6'5", 240 and you're a statue and you can't move, I think you're going to be pushed down the board a little bit. Unless you're just that elite at standing there and throwing the football. But the other one is experience. Being there when the bullets are flying. Getting real live reps in games. And if that sounds silly, it shouldn't. For years, teams have been chasing traits so hard when it comes to quarterbacks, maybe to a fault. And we know the bust rate. We know the numbers. We've seen it all, right? All the quarterbacks that have been taken in the top 10 in the history of the NFL. But in particular, I think it's been amplified the last 10 years or so. Because teams will overreach and they'll artificially inflate the stock of a prospect just because he can throw it 70, 80 yards. He's an elite athlete. We saw Anthony Richardson get drafted in the top 5, in the top 4, because he put on the greatest athletic display any quarterback ever has at the combine, and he's just oozing, dripping with physical skill. And teams became enamored with that. But he only had 1 year as a starter at Florida, and his completion percentage there was barely 50%. So it was all projection. So far, looks like a miss. There are other examples too. Mark Sanchez, there was a lot of criticism when the Jets took him in the first round. Now, God, how many years ago was that? Because he only had 1 full-time year as a starter. How'd that work out? Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, other sort of cautionary tales when it comes to taking a guy just because he's dripping with traits. Trey Lance had only started 1 game in college at a lower level and didn't play because of COVID, went 3rd. Zach Wilson went in the top 3, 1 year as a full-time starter. There's something that cannot be replicated when it comes to playing quarterback. No matter what, you could use, the virtual reality stuff now, right? You can watch all the film you want with Skycam so you can see the play developing out in front of you, all of that. Nothing replicates live reps in game situations, in particular, ideally at a high level in a big conference, in tough atmospheres, on the road, against rival, in front of rival fans, against players that are at the caliber that they're being taken in the first round and on day 1 and day 2 in the draft as well. I'm going to show you a couple of blind resumes here from quarterbacks. Well, they're not 2 blind resumes. One is most clearly going to be Brock Purdy. His is right at the top. That's his career at Iowa State. And we may not see this again out of any NFL quarterback for quite some time now, a guy that spends his entire career at one school. That freshman year, I was familiar with Purdy early in his college career because he finished out his true freshman year, never redshirted, played all 4 years. He finished out that year in the Alamo Bowl against the Washington State Cougars, my alma mater. And that was an outstanding team. I don't know if you remember it, but he had David Montgomery in his backfield and Akeem Butler as his receiver, and Butler just shredded us in that game. I think he had like 12 catches for 150 plus yards. Purdy looked good, and then so he was a guy that I kind of kept my eye on as his career progressed. But I just didn't really think I saw an NFL starter there. Even though as you see these numbers, he's the one on the top. Very, very, very consistent year in, year out. Never more than 10 interceptions in a year. Overall, 48 games. All starts. 12,000 yards, 81 touchdowns, 33 interceptions, 8.3 yards per attempt, 253 yards per game, 151 passer rating. There's a couple of guys in this draft that have that type of experience. One of them is at the bottom. 45 career starts, 12,000 yards, exact same number of touchdown passes, 6 fewer interceptions, a better yards per attempt, a little more action down the field, 266 yards per game, a 158 passer rating. And that last season, you can see was the best season of all 8 of these seasons between the two. 180.7 passer rating last year, 10.8 yards per attempt. That's outstanding. 4,300 yards, 29 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Playing in the SEC. Can you tell me who that is? That is Jackson Dart. The Purdy comparison occurred to me about a week ago as I was watching some of his tape, and it came from a place of his physical traits. They're kind of built the same. They sort of move the same. They're not that much different. Dart's a little bit bigger. Purdy's listed at 6'1", 215. Dart 6'2", 220. He's mobile. He can move around. The rushing statistics are similar as well. He's played a lot of games at a high level. Started out as a freshman at USC. Got 6 starts there. Again, I saw him as a true freshman. I've seen both these quarterbacks as a true freshman against the Cougs. He came in, it was in Pullman. Starter got hurt. Can't remember who it was. Was it Darnold? I don't think so then. Came in and looked great. I thought, wow, this kid's got some talent. And then my ears perked up again when I had Bruce Feldman on before the season started. Talked a little bit to him about his freaks list, but also this quarterback class. And he said 2 things that really stuck out. One is he said he thought scouts were telling him that Cam Ward was going to end up being a high first-round draft pick. Now I think Ward's going to end up going number 1. And he also said Jackson Dart's another guy teams really like, and they think he's going to end up potentially going in the first round. And we've already seen reports now that he's the guy kind of with a bullet, sort of rising up draft boards. Finished his career in great fashion, was unbelievable. What was it, the Peach Bowl in his finale for Ole Miss. And I've got a little clip, got a little bit of video I want to show you here in a second. And then I just want to talk a little bit more about how I think that might translate to the NFL and why I think he might be a guy that might be in the Seahawks sights. But first this. You guys have heard me talk about Doer before, built for doing, the best apparel company you've never heard of. And I say that because I had never heard of them before they approached me. But since then, now I am a believer. These guys make the best apparel I've ever worn. Straight up. These jeans right here, these performance denim relaxed jeans, 20% stretch, but they feel like really well-built, high-quality jeans. These things are going to last my entire life, but I wear them almost every day. These moleskin shirts, incredibly stylish, comfortable, soft. They come in a bunch of different colors and styles. I absolutely love them. Everything they make with quality. They make it with sustainable materials. It's antibacterial materials. And right now, for being a viewer, a listener of my program, if you go to their unique URL, shopdoer.com/forever, and that's shopdoer, DUER/forever, you'll get 20% off your first order. All right. So back to this. I want to talk a little bit more about Jackson Dart. And I'm not going to do a full breakdown here for you today, but I did just throw a clip together of some of my favorite things that really made me kind of sit up in my chair as I was watching him a couple of days ago. 2 very different plays here. This first one that I'm going to show you, because I'm not going to stop it and start it and kind of, we're not going to do that. It's him getting pressure, because if I'm scouting quarterbacks that I think might fit in Seattle, as much as I think there's going to be a concerted effort this offseason to improve that offensive line and build an infrastructure, so that either if Geno Smith's back, you can get the most out of him. We've been saying for years now, give him a really good offensive line, a good play caller that protects him and knows how to play to his strengths and can run the football and take that off of him and work play action, all those things that we continue to talk about here on the channel. That exact same infrastructure is exactly what you want to have in place to drop a young quarterback. I was on with the guys from Seahawkers today doing a little watch party for that Rams-Eagles game. Adam and Clinton and Brandon. And we were talking about Jalen Hurts. And we all agreed. I mean, I threw this idea out. I didn't know if I was going to get pushback on it or not. I don't consider Jalen Hurts talent-wise to be one of the elite quarterbacks in the league. I don't. But he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, production-wise. And I think it's because he landed in a perfect situation and they've handled him the perfect way. I think if Jalen Hurts had been drafted to another dysfunctional team, the Carolina Panthers or the Jets or the Giants or the Browns or whatever, he might not be a full-time starter making the money he's making today. He's a very, very good quarterback that I don't think possesses an elite trait at all. But he plays in an offense suited perfectly to him. He has a great offensive line in front of him. They can run the football. He's got great receivers. He's got a play caller that's really, really competent, spreads the ball around. I think Jalen Hurts is another good example of a guy that played a lot of games in college at a high level at two different programs, got exposed to that, and then landed in the right situation. And there aren't guys in every draft class that can do this, but this one possesses a couple of them. I think Will Howard's another one. 4 years as the starter at Kansas State, including the COVID year. Then he goes to Ohio State, steps up a big level. He's playing for a national championship on Monday and has gotten better as the year's gone along. And as the year's gone along, looks more and more and more like a starting NFL quarterback and potentially a very good one. To me, 49 games started at the college level. Another guy that fits that mold. There are some others that have played that much football, but they're more of your day three guys that just don't either have the traits. You have to have some combination of traits, right? You can't just be a guy from Sacramento State that started 50 games but can't throw the ball 30 yards, right? I think Howard's another one. But this first play from Dart is he's under pressure. And that's what it started to say. Sorry, I get off on tangents a little bit. I want to see how a guy handles pressure because it might take a little while. Even with that effort, I think the Seahawks are going to put into the offensive line this offseason. You need continuity, and it might take a little bit for that to come together. And you want to see how a guy handles pressure, a rusher right in his face. And then you also want to just see what he's made of. And I think this clip, it's two plays here. This first one, watch him get blasted right as he's throwing the football. He scans the field. He looks at the one guy on the crosser and delivers that ball while getting blasted. Love that play. And then watch this. Designed quarterback draw. 1, 2, 3, 4. Runs over. Breaks 4 tackles. It's a fun player. Some really cool qualities. We'll do a much deeper dive into Jackson Dart as we get closer to the draft. Certainly after I've seen him in Mobile. Again, another reminder, I'll be headed down there to the Senior Bowl. I'll be covering the entire week. Maybe I'm crazy. It's my first time there. I want to do it right. Maybe I'm the only one that's going to be there from Sunday to Sunday, but I am. I'm going to go live every single day. Look forward to that. So another reason to be sure to subscribe to the channel. And Jackson Dart's one of the guys that I'm excited to see up close. Also, we'll get a chance to see Will Howard down there and Jalen Milroe. Riley Leonard is another guy that's played a ton, 2-year full-time starter at Duke and then steps up a level to Notre Dame. So some really, really interesting guys to look at down there. But I feel like this is kind of where the Seahawks will need to focus their attention. Look, they have no shot to get Cam Ward. And while there are varying degrees of opinions on Shedeur Sanders, and I'm already starting to see reports that maybe he's falling down draft boards and that as evaluators get to know him and watch him go through the process, that he might not be a slam dunk to go to the Browns or the Giants as much as he wants to go to the Giants. And the story that I read these quotes in kind came from the angle of like maybe the Raiders sitting there at 6 do have a shot at Sanders, but the Seahawks don't. They can't move up and get him, and even if they could put a package together, I wouldn't want to see it. Because I just don't feel like Sanders is that guy. There are some other guys, though, that I think, and I've said on the show, start drafting a quarterback every single year until you hit him, till you hit on one, whether or not you bring Geno Smith back to finish out his contract or on an extension, or you move on from him and you bring another bridge quarterback in, doesn't matter. Start drafting quarterbacks every single year until you find a guy that you think can be the one. And that's why I think this Purdy profile works, because I think it applies to players that just don't have the physical traits to go top 10. Teams are still going to weight those qualities heavily when they're drafting that high. Even if teams could go back again and do it with hindsight being 2020 in that draft, they're not taking Purdy in the top 10 still. Because I think in a bunch of teams' evaluations would be like, he's not really that, he's not that big, he's not that great of an athlete, the arm's not that great. But he probably could go in the back half of the first round just because, remember, drafting quarterbacks isn't always about the precise spot that they should go in based on their talent. It's about need, sometimes desperate need. And it's about who else is in on the market and what are the odds that he might still be there if we wait another pick. That's why you're starting to already hear reports that Dart might end up going in the first round. Right? Now, we hear those reports all the time. We heard them, Will Levis might sneak into the first round, right? Some of those guys that end up going second or third, and sometimes they don't. It doesn't come to fruition. I think with Dart, I think at the end of the day, if I had to put my money on one or the other right now, I think when the end of April comes around, the draft comes around, I think Jackson Dart's a first-round pick. Because I do think he's QB3 in this class. And I think there's that much need. I don't know about number 6 to the Raiders. That could be really high. But again, because of how the market's inflated, like how many people didn't think Bo Nix deserved to go 12 last year? Right? I think the majority, based on what I recall about discussion happening among fans and analysts as we got closer to the draft, was he might be a first-round guy, and he might be a capable starter in the league long-term, but 12's rich. But all it took was one team with a desperate need and a coach who really, really liked him to take him 12. I think a similar thing could happen with Dart this year. He could be this year's Bo Nix. I think in outcome as well. If you were to go to the right situation, I think he could be successful as a rookie. And I think the Seahawks could be in play for him. And if they're thinking about taking Jackson Dart and they don't, hoping he makes it to the second round, I don't think he does, because I think we just watched a team play that's probably also keeping an eye on the future and wanting to target and acquire a young quarterback to groom behind their aging veteran, and that's the LA Rams. And I can see Sean McVay really liking Jackson Dart and wanting to take him at 22 or whatever they end up picking after losing today, and being the guy to groom behind Matt Stafford, because they have a decision this offseason too. I think Stafford has zero guaranteed money on his final 2 years of his deal, if I'm not mistaken. Because there was some reporting done before the season that he was talking about maybe wanting to push for a new contract and getting some more guaranteed money. I think they'll give that to him. I think they'll work something out with Stafford to keep him happy, keep him around. But I think McVay is going to have an eye towards the future too, and I can see him really being enamored with Jackson Dart. So if the Seahawks want him, they might have to take him at 18. Now, would he be behind Geno Smith, or would he be behind Sam Howell or another veteran? We don't know, and we won't know. But I just wanted to make that point. As you're going through this process with us, right, and you're listening to these discussions, you're watching tape or YouTube highlights on your own, you're watching the Combine, you're watching the Senior Bowl, look at how much football the guys played. Because you might see a play or two that makes you makes you sit up and take notice and gets you excited. But how much football has he played? Right? How ingrained are those habits, those instincts, and that muscle memory? The more you play, the more you build that up, the stronger that muscle memory is and how to react to adverse situations, the more I would trust a prospect that's coming out as opposed to like a one-year wonder. Jalen Milroe kind of falls in the middle of that. 2 years as a starter. But 2 years as a starter at the highest level you can possibly play in college, playing in meaningful games against really good teams every week in the SEC, playing in playoff games. He's a guy that I still need to dig into much deeper and get to know him and see what he can do. And if I think he's a guy that could make that leap. But we're going to have that discussion tonight on The Pick Is In at 6 o'clock Pacific time with Bryce Coots as we break down the entire draft class. We're also going to break down, we're going to analyze it. We call this segment Mocking the Mocks. And we're going to take a look at Dane Brugler's latest 2-round mock draft. It was just released in The Athletic. That's what I had for you today, but I want to hit some comments and questions before I take off. This is becoming a regular. These are making a regular appearance on the show, huh? Glasses? That might just be that time. Jeffrey O'Kelly says, bye-bye Rams. I'll tell you what, here's the thing. As a Seahawk fan, and I like to be respectful, and I appreciate the hell out of other teams when they're good and they do good things, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Sean McVay. I think he's one of the best ever. I really do. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Matt Stafford. I think he may go down. We may look back 20 years from now and recognize him as a guy that I think is maybe will be one of the most overlooked or underrated quarterbacks. I think he's borderline Hall of Fame. He's a talent, and he almost pulled that thing off today. Holy smokes. But when you look at that Rams team, if you're a Seahawk fan and you're sizing up the future of the division, the Rams are scary. What they've done with that defense in the last 2 drafts, while losing Aaron Donald, kind of ticks me off a little bit. So for them to lose today, every year they have Matt Stafford, but fail to win a Super Bowl, is 1 year closer to potentially the end of that window, at least with him. He was fantastic today, I thought, in really, really adverse conditions. James says he's an anomaly. Sean says, thank you for the hard work. Appreciate that. Also says Rams lost. It's a good day. I have come to be online friends with a number of Rams fans. Some of them follow me, very respectful towards each other. Again, I really respect what they did this year, starting 1-4, coming all the way back, winning the division, winning a playoff game, getting and then taking the Rams or the Eagles down to the wire at their place in the snow. Kudos to the Rams for the season they had. As Andy pointed out there, could have easily won. Yep. James says Stafford's a beast. Just hoping the kids can keep up. Let's see. Yeah, Jeffrey says Johnson will call his own plays. He will. Yeah, when I talk about he's going to take someone from that staff to be his OC in name. They won't call plays, just like the OC in San Francisco, the OC with the Rams, the OC under Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, the OC in Cincinnati. Those guys don't call plays, but they have the offensive coordinator title. So could it be Tanner Ingstrand he takes with him, or does he stay in Detroit and get that job? Does he take Fraley with him, or does maybe Fraley prefers to stay in Detroit and get the OC title? So the Seahawks may want to hire him, may want to interview him again. We may wake up tomorrow to news that Fraley has declined to take a second interview. We'll see. Detroit had some sweet trick plays yesterday. I want Fraley. Yeah, man, there's some criticism. Some people today, I saw one football writer say that Johnson had a very bad game yesterday. That's just stupid. They put up 500 yards yesterday. I thought Ben Johnson was fantastic. Yeah, he got a little cute. A couple of the trick plays didn't work out, but, you appreciate the aggressiveness. Let's go here. James with the super thanks. Appreciate that. In a perfect world, these efficient seasons from Geno would rub off on Howell. I'm leaning to sign Geno and take a dart or Howell early. Look, I think people are way too quick to jump off of the idea that Sam Howell could be a serviceable quarterback for a while. He could be the bridge. He could be the answer. Just because we saw him in a really tough circumstance come in and look terrible against the Packers. But we're talking about facing a defense that knew that we had to throw the ball because we're down 3 scores. And yet Ryan Grubb called 12 straight pass plays. Didn't give him any chance really to succeed. Howell probably was having PTSD and thinking he was back in Washington during that game, because that was a situation under Eric Bieniemy, his first year as a starter. Bieniemy the Commanders led the league or darn near in pass rate, and they were throwing it almost 70% of the time and leaving their tackles on an island, no play action, no running game, and just hanging them out there to dry. So, yeah, he led the league in interceptions, but he put a lot of good throws and got a lot of good reps on tape too. And I liked what I saw from him in the preseason games. I know the reports are that for the first few weeks, at least, of training camp, he didn't look that good. But the things I saw on tape in college, I liked him coming out. I liked when the trade was made. Thought it was a good calculated risk on the part of John Schneider and the Seahawks. I haven't given up on him yet. Haven't quite given up on him yet. Rather be flying an X-Wing. Always good to see you in here. Niners look like they're spiraling towards a rebuild. Kyler's Kyler, so I think the division is for the Rams. Us or the Rams for the next couple of years. I agree with you. I've been in the boat since I saw him play as a rookie, that Kyler Murray's not that guy, and that when they signed him to an extension, it actually was doing the rest of the division a favor. I don't think he did anything to change my opinion this year. I think they had some winnable games where Kyler just didn't get anything done. I just don't think he has the wiring, the mental makeup to be great. And I think as long as they're committed to him, that's going to hold them back to some respects. And the 49ers have some issues, but they've been really creative in how they do their contracts. They have a bunch of cap space. They can fix some things. That's a place players want to play. They've got some aging players. They have players they have to make decisions on extensions. And they got to pay the quarterback finally. They got to pay the piper. And so I know down there, they're lamenting the fact they don't have a Super Bowl to show for the 4 years they got to play with Purdy on a rookie contract. And I know that frustrates fans. But as long as Kyle Shanahan's there and John Lynch is calling the shots, that team's always going to be a factor, And now they get a full offseason to recuperate, recover, reassess, bounce back. I'm not super happy about the reports that Robert Saleh might end up there as a defensive coordinator. As a Seahawk fan, I'm really rooting for him to get one of these head coaching jobs. But yeah, they're down right now, but I expect them to bounce back. There's Brights. And again, another reminder on @ThePickIsIn, our new YouTube channel, @ThePickIsIn Pod. Get over there at 6 o'clock Pacific time tonight. We're going to have our second episode on that show, focusing on the NFL draft as a whole, league-wide. And we're going to do a dive into the quarterback class tonight and take a look at Dane Brugler's 2-round mock draft. I wonder if Frank Ragnow's comments about Fraley give us some insight on what may happen this week. It could. Fraley could be a priority for them. I could see them knowing that Ben Johnson is going to leave. That's what it sounds. I don't think anyone doubts that. I kind of understood last year why he decided to stay. But now, man, if he decided to stay again, if I'm an organization looking for a head coach next year and thinking about paying a guy $8, $9, $10 million, I would question. I would ask. I would take a pause, wondering why, the guy doesn't think he's ready or isn't hungry enough to pursue it. So he's gone. Maybe Fraley's the guy that they absolutely, because he coaches that O-line, and that's such a big part of what they do, but also that he has the ability to potentially be in line to call plays. Maybe he's a guy that they just sell out to keep him, give him a big raise, a title, he gets to stay. But let me ask you this. if that were to happen, Bryce, does Tanner Ingstrand then come into play? And if that is a possibility, then why didn't the Seahawks also interview him? I know they did last year, though. Maybe they felt like they didn't need to. Maybe I just answered my own question because I got to know him last year in the interview process, right? So maybe he comes into play if that's indeed what happens with Fraley. But I would suspect at that point, though, they would go. I think Kubiak's a guy. I said this today when I was on the watch party with the guys from the Seahawkers. If you had told me that, 2 days after Grubb's fired, they interview Kubiak and hire him on the spot and don't really do an extensive search outside of what you are required to for the Rooney Rule, I would have been okay with that. I think Kubiak's a really, really solid candidate and one that we can all feel good about. And I think he checks just about every box, if not all of them, of what Mike Macdonald's looking for in an OC. A lot of things are going to happen. I'm going to be setting early alarms the next couple of days, getting up and checking Twitter right away, so I can try to be on top of this news for you when it breaks. Can we? Cal says, can we just trade everything for Purdy instead? Yeah. I mean, he admits he's joking, but knew he was special immediately. Remember that first training camp. He's a 7th round pick. They had Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo. And what's the story? Shanahan went to, I don't think it was Lynch, I think it was Jed York, the owner, right? And said to him, he was either asked by York or he just offered this opinion unprompted. And he said, I think our best quarterback's the rookie. Right now, our best quarterback. So, Martin Lawrence says, I think that it's going to be Kubiak as OC. And maybe Udinski is a full position coach to have someone for transition if Kubiak is a success, moves on to a head coaching job. I talked about this again in that watch party today too, and bandied this about this idea with Bryce over the last couple of days through text, that the fact that they both interviewed on Friday in person for their second interviews, were they all in the same room together at the same time at any point? Because I wonder if that's kind of the team they're assembling. And I think, these things are kind of vague. We saw it last year with Mike Kafka, where they were able to block the Seahawks from interviewing him, let alone hiring him. After McDonald was hired, they wanted to interview him again to try and hire him for OC. And the Giants blocked him because they said they were going to give him play calling duties because it's a technical lateral move. In this case, I don't think that applies. I don't think you can go back retrospectively, correct me if I'm wrong, and if somebody has some intel on this, and promote someone to a position to prevent losing them to a lateral move. Right now, Grant Udinski, the 28-year-old from the Vikings, is the assistant quarterback coach. So by my understanding, I think the Seahawks could offer him their passing game coordinator job, which is currently held by Jake Peetz, so that would mean moving off of him, and be able to, the Vikings wouldn't be able to block him. I think that's how it works. So maybe they are working on a scenario where they hire Kubiak as OC, he'd be your play caller. Grant Udinski's the guy that comes in and is kind of groomed, right? Sort of the next up-and-coming big, sort of, the next Sean McVay. Gets tossed around a little casually at times, I think. But the stories you hear about this guy are similar. He's been in the league now as a full-time coach for 5 years, and he's only 28 now. I could get really excited about something like that. I have to imagine they were both here on Friday. Maybe we end up hearing that they were all hanging out together. Although there were no Dino's situations, no Dino's pictures this year. No one spotted at Dino's. Dan Low Music question. Dan, what do you think of Syracuse quarterback Kyle McCord? I know watching our bowl game, the announcers loved him. They would say his name even when he handed it to the running back. He had a phenomenal year, and it's always fun for me to watch a player just find his situation, right? Clearly, for whatever reason, they didn't think he was the guy at Ohio State, and so he had to enter the transfer portal. He goes to Syracuse. The new head coach there says, we're going to build it around you. And look what they did. I mean, he was phenomenal. And he's a name that Max Brown was on the show a couple of months ago. He brought him up in sort of the same topic here where I'm always interested in asking these analysts, like, who's the next Brock Purdy? That's kind of the measuring stick now, right? And he said Kyle McCord, a guy that he had worked 3 of his games in a row leading up to that show in his role as a color analyst for the OC, for the WB, for whatever that network is that did the Pac-12 games this year. And he loved McCord. And then I watched the next couple of games live after he told me that. And there's a lot to like there. He and Dart are similar players in some ways, by my eye. But again, another little shameless plug. Head over to the Pick Is In tonight at 6 o'clock and listen to Bryce and I break down that, mostly Bryce, break down that quarterback class. Martin, I don't think we can get both those guys. If we get Fraley, then maybe Udinski too, but with Kubiak, I don't see it. I don't know. He's got to have a staff. You know, maybe he has a working relationship with Jake Peetz and wants to keep him, or he has a guy from the Saints that he wants to bring with him. Yeah, we just don't really know. There you go. Bryce says, McCord's one of my draft crushes. Tune in, the Pick Is In tonight. I have my scouting report. Hawks Zone rundown right there. There's Ryan. What's up, Ryan? Another one for Jackson Dart. Dan Low Music says, I like him as a mid-rounder to late. Not sure where I put him yet. I need to watch more Dart. I like William Howard too, but that could also be because that's my brother's name. Yeah, it's funny sometimes, some of the little things that just color our bias, right? Sometimes it's a certain school that a player plays for. I know that was a big thing when C.J. Stroud came out last year. There was a lot of people that dismissed him as a prospect, just because Ohio State quarterbacks haven't done well lately. Justin Fields, Terrell Pryor before him. You know, the list is pretty long. To which my answer was always, no, he's a different human being. He has different DNA. It's not the same guy. And sure enough, C.J. Stroud is kind of broken that mold a little bit. But, you know, I fall for that sometimes too, you know. Yeah, here we go. Howard's stock should rise if he has a good game tomorrow. Can't wait to see it. It's risen in my eyes. You know, I first heard of Will Howard a couple of years ago. Rob Staten brought him up when he was watching him at Kansas State. The thing about Howard is every single year at Kansas State, he had a sub 60% completion percentage. And if your completion percentage in college starts with a 5, that's bad. Anthony Richardson had a 50-ish percent completion percentage, but because he was 6'5", runs like the wind, can throw it 80 yards, teams dreamed on him, and that's what pushed him up. They're like, we can work with that. That's a big ball of clay. But completion percent, I can't remember who it was that said this a couple of years ago. I feel like maybe it was Steve Mariucci or Kurt Warner, one of the guys on NFL Network, that in their experience, they said completion percentage accuracy isn't something you can really teach. That's a skill. And if you don't have that skill at the college level, to expect to leap up to the highest level of competition on the planet and improve your completion percentage up to a capable level, which is in that 65 to 70 range, that's tough to expect. And we've seen it play out now in real life in front of our eyes with Anthony Richardson, and Will Howard was one of those guys too. He was a big guy that can move around. He'd run the football, and he'd make some plays. Then he goes to Ohio State, and I think he's at 73% completions, playing at the highest level, and now he's playing for a national title. And what's really driven him up my draft board the last couple of weeks is when I've watched his playoff games, I've watched the alternative broadcast where they show the sky cam the whole time. So you get to see from behind the quarterback, you get to see things developing and seeing the layered throws and the seam balls that he's throwing. And I mean, he's flat out making NFL throws into NFL windows all over the field under the most pressure you could have as a college quarterback playing at the highest level. He really looks like a dude in my eyes right now that you could get on day 2 potentially and ride with as your guy. Not sure how I feel about Tanner McKee. I know that, he's made the roster the last couple of years and he's had some moments in the preseason, but I just remember there were things I'd liked about him watching his Stanford tape. I liked his arm. I especially remember watching tape of him playing against the Washington Huskies, and he looked phenomenal. I just haven't, in anything he's done with the Eagles in the preseason, or even when I was watching his Stanford tape, I didn't watch anything that was convincing enough to me. Now, there are some dudes in this league that are hidden, that nobody's talking about, that might be attainable if you were to offer their team. There's 3 guys I'm thinking of the right draft capital because they're stuck under guys that are going nowhere. And so if you're trying to find like the next Matt Hasselbeck, right? Like a guy you can trade for and he becomes your guy, I think there's 3 potential possibilities, but I'm not going to tell you what those are today because that's a show that's going to be coming up later this week. And on that note, we're going to keep talking quarterbacks on the other YouTube channel at 6 o'clock Pacific time with Bryce Coots and I. The pick is in, and we're going to break down this quarterback class, talk about how it's a little better than advertised, I think. And there are some guys that could potentially be Seahawks. One of them better be, because I'll keep saying it till I'm blue in the face. They need to start taking quarterbacks in the draft every year. No more talk. Let's get some action. Put your money where your mouth is, John Schneider. Start drafting quarterbacks. That'll be at 6 o'clock. In the meantime, hit subscribe here, share the channel, be a member of the community. It's the best way to support the channel. All the other tangible ways you can support it are down below in the comments. Shout out to BetUS for sponsoring this episode as always. Forever and always go Hawks. I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. We'll see you in a little bit on The Pick Is In. Until then, thanks for watching.